Welcome to Warrior, the Art of War for Life, a podcast for those who want to win. Leadership lessons, motivational mindsets, empowering principles, success strategies, and transformational tactics from Swinzel, the master of victory. I'm your guide on the side, David Boyd, award-winning educator, transformational speaker, and certified life coach. It's time to start winning at life.
Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm so glad you guys are here today. We have another installment of our Warrior Mindset Unplugged, and my guest today is dear friend Kim Pinske, an All-American in volleyball and weightlifting coach and competitor and Brazilian Jiujitsu champion on so many levels and inspiration, and we're going to talk about just some amazing things today. So thank you for tuning in, and I really hope you get something out of this. I know you will. The stories are just amazing, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Excited.
I'm excited too.
So I did a horrible job of introducing you, but I want to give you a few minutes to introduce yourself and anything you want to let the audience know. But we've known each other for 15 years.
Yes.
So you came to the Academy in 2007, the year before me, so it's been about 16 years now, as the first female strength and conditioning coach at USAFA, and we get to talk about that a little bit. All-American in volleyball at the University of Minnesota, right? Team captain, academic All-American as well. And talk about some of the lessons that you learned there, and then also your journey into weightlifting, competitive weightlifting, Colorado State champion 4 years in a row, and placed really high nationally, 13th.
13th, yep.
And so teaching and performing at an elite level, and you get into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and as a white belt you start winning competitions. Yes. And then in the midst of all this successful career, you decide you want to join the Army.
I did.
And go into as a military police, right?
Yes,
and
military police.
This is not an easy, you didn't pick like some desk job. You wanted to be right there on the front lines, which speaks a lot to you. So I want to hear about that too. And then we'll get into some of the challenges. But first, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay. So my name is Kim Pinske, like Dave said. I've been at the Academy since 2007. I work in our combatives department for physical education. I'm the course director for Combatives 1. Additionally, I am a strength and conditioning coach, and right now I work with our women's basketball, men's soccer, and women's diving teams. So
yeah.
I have my bachelor's degree from the University of Minnesota in sport and recreation management, and I have my master's degree from North Dakota State in health, nutrition, and exercise science. So that is my education and my path to the Academy. Hard to believe it's been 16 years.
I know.
That's a long time.
It's so true.
That is a long time.
And if I ever needed a bodyguard, you would be my top choice.
I'd call somebody else. No, I'm kidding.
So we met playing volleyball.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your volleyball career. So, 4-year starter and academic All-American, but also multi-year team captain and All-American. Where did you get your mindset from in volleyball? What was that like for you as a team sport, right? You gotta work with other people.
I grew up on a farm. My parents milked dairy cattle for quite some time.
Wow.
And then my dad got a pretty severe injury in his back, herniated a bunch of discs in his back, and so he couldn't milk anymore. And so they sold the dairy herd and got beef cattle. And we had just all kinds of animals, like we had hogs, chicken, like geese, like you name it. Those geese are better watchdogs than our regular dogs. Like
geese can be mean.
And so I think I was the youngest child in my family, so I think that growing up doing chores at a pretty young age, whether it was the farm chores or chores in the house, My mom was a nurse and worked nights, so having opposite schedules, my parents having opposite schedules, you gotta pull together for the family. And so I think that work ethic was instilled in that way. Like, you're mowing lawn when you're little, and you're driving tractor like when you're little, and you do for the family. And so I think I don't necessarily think I had I want to be good at volleyball mindset. I just had I'm gonna work hard because that's what I know to do mindset. And working hard doesn't necessarily equate to success, by the way. Like, working hard is just working hard, doesn't mean anything else. But I think that I enjoyed the challenge of those things. Like, I enjoy being challenged of figuring this task out that my parents asked me to do, or learning to cook for the first time and the challenge of that. And so I personally enjoyed challenges like that. And so whether it was academically or volleyball, like, I enjoyed learning and the path that it took to conquer some of those hard things.
Yeah.
Like that.
So that's where you got your mindset from.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. And one of the things we talk about on the podcast is the warrior mindset, which I define as the ability to look at any situation and believe that you're going to figure it out. We're going to find the tools that we need. We're going to find the allies we need, the resources. We may not be able to tackle that big challenge at the end right now, but we have enough to get started, and we can take a step towards what we want, and we're going to become stronger. We're going to grow and learn, and that is, to me, the warrior mindset.
Yes.
And you've always embodied that, and a great example of that to me.
I appreciate that.
I've always admired your strength. And your determination. When we first started playing volleyball, there was an intensity there sometimes that was honestly kind of intimidating for me in the beginning. And I'll tell you why. It was not because because anything had to do with you, but it had to do with me, actually. As I kind of went through my own growth mindset and my own journey and work, I felt really disempowered in a lot of ways in my life. And so to see people who were courageous and strong, and this is what I want and this is what I'm going to go get, was intimidating, because it challenged some of those limiting beliefs that I had about myself. That, I don't know, do I feel that, that courage and that determination to go and get it? And so, it's I learned that from you and other people that I saw who were, I actually can step into this role a bit more and be courageous and confident.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah, it is. It is scary.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Because there's always that, well, what if I fail? And then, well, what does failure mean? And does that mean I'm a failure? And how do we define what that is? Because just because you lose doesn't mean you're a failure. And I know that we were talking before the podcast started, but, for example, it's the NCAA wrestling tournament right now. And 50% of those people are going to lose their first match.
Yeah.
50%.
So hard to get to that point.
Yeah, so do you know what I mean? So it's like, are they failures, or, because they're the top 32 people in the nation in that weight class, but half of them are going to lose. So it's like, I think it's, well, what is failure? What does that mean? I think there's such a weird connotation to the word that we could redefine, like, for ourselves, especially, like, what does that actually mean? You lost a match, you're not a failure because you won 33 others or whatever, So I think it's just, it's an interesting paradox.
Yeah, and honestly, you bringing up failure is really important, because I had to redefine my definition of failure. Like, you nailed me right there. Like, I grew up thinking, I had this performance-based worth.
Sure.
And so you're only as good as your last game. You lose, you're a failure, right? And so all of a sudden it's like, well, I needed to change that about me. Right, because of that. It's not a fun roller coaster, but I had the fast pass on that one for a long time, right? And because then when our worth is tied into our performance, then defeat and failure for me meant that I felt worthless.
Yeah. And I do too. Did too. I would say that, like, in the past 5 years, through another topic that we'll be talking about later, like, I think that has redefine that a little bit for me, which is good. That's always good growth, and I think that you should continue to grow till the day they put you in the ground, But those I think those challenges are super important for us to define, but like we have to be able to be comfortable being uncomfortable in that, I think. And that's really hard. That is not easy at all.
No. And as a matter of fact, I think by the time this episode airs, we will have talked about one of Sun's key concepts, which is understand yourself and understand others. And it's kind of a well-known quote from Sun Tzu, right? But what people often either don't get is the second half of this, which is if you understand yourself and you understand others, you won't be broken in 100 battles. He doesn't say you won't lose.
Yeah. Oh.
But losing won't break us. Defeat doesn't destroy us, right? It's not devastating. And I was massively risk averse for a long time because of how devastating I thought that failure or that defeat would mean, what it would mean for me. And so I held myself out in a lot of ways and didn't put myself on the line at risk. So, yeah.
I think we all do that until we, and I think that sometimes we, play it off as a joke or whatever else. Like we make an uncomfortable situation like comfortable enough for us,
right,
even though we haven't addressed the problem.
Yeah, so. The insecure humor.
Yes, like right now. No, I'm kidding.
So, what would you say was the biggest thing that you learned in volleyball? 4 years. What was your biggest takeaway?
So I was recruited as a hitter, and that's all I wanted to do: hit. And I got an injury my freshman year, like right out of the gate during fall camp. Ugh. I had torn my rectus abdominis on my left side, the muscle that sits on top of your abdominal wall, and that was it. Could not put my arm over my head. Like there was just this huge hematoma in there, and it like actually protruded from my body, and so I went from hitting and all that to like that year I couldn't play it. I had a medical hardship, and then I was a defensive specialist until, I'm gonna age myself, until they created the libero position. My senior year did not exist till I was a senior in college. And then I found a new purpose. I found that I could play all these rotations. I knew everybody's position on offense. I knew where everybody was supposed to be defensively, because again I would still rotate. And so the biggest, I guess, lesson I learned was, kind of be prepared for anything, because it was like, well, my choices are, be the libero, or defensive specialist or whatever, or just not play.
Right. And
so like that was not going to be an option for me, because I loved it too much. And so it's like you're just going to learn to adapt. And after my ab healed, I developed a jump serve. And
a good one.
And I was able to turn that into my offensive weapon, my hitting weapon, because by then, they recruited over me, and which they should have, and they do every year, right? So, so I wasn't going to hit anymore even after my ab got better, and so it's like, okay, well, I can be scathing though with my serve. And so to be able to do that, and the irony in all of that is, I was recruited to play basketball as well, and I was a post, little 5'9" me being a post, right? Because I could bang around in there, and they were gonna be like, okay, well, we're recruiting you to play, a 2 or 3 position, so shooting guard, small forward, something like that.
Yeah. And
I turned them all down because I wanted to play in the post. And the irony of that is, I got recruited to play volleyball as a hitter and ended up not hitting anyways. So the position, the position that I wanted to play and they weren't gonna let me play, I still didn't play it over here. So that was laced in irony for me, and learned the lesson anyways. So I think that I was meant to learn that lesson, considering it was going to happen no matter what choice I had.
That's so funny. You remind me of a story, and I shared this in an earlier episode of my podcast. I sprouted. I'm 5'10". Barefoot maybe on my right foot.
In the program.
I'm 3/4, 5'9", 3/4. My right leg's a little shorter than my left leg from when I broke it when I was young. But I sprouted up to this height in 6th grade. And so in 6th grade, at 5'10", I'm following my dad's shoes and playing power forward. And then I stopped growing. Every year, everybody gets taller,
Except
and I
you.
don't. And I move from power forward to small forward. And they're like, "You better start working on that, that shot out there, and then you got to work on my range." And then all of a sudden, I'm moving to the 3, and it's like, "Okay, you better start." Now all of a sudden, I'm a shooting guard, and I better get used to the catch and shoot. And I remember, as a freshman, my coach coming in saying, "If you want to play at high school level, you're going to have to improve your ball handling skills.
Because now you're going to have the handles and you're going to bring the ball up, So just funny how, irony kind of, and I didn't even realize that, really. I was thinking about when I was 25, 26, something like that, 100 years ago now. And I just, for some reason, I connected those dots. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was faced with both situations regardless. It was just in my cards. That's what was going to happen. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I just had this, the whole day I was like, oh my gosh. It was just a bizarre, realization, after the fact.
Yeah.
But it all worked out. Got a degree, and, and I oftentimes wonder too, what if I would have played basketball? Would I be here talking to you? I don't know. Would I be married to my husband? I don't know all these things, because it's just a choose your own adventure book. And I think though that we're all right where we're supposed to be. So
yeah, I think so. And the principle here that you kind of highlighted is we don't always get to choose what comes down our lives. We make the best plans we can. We get really intentional with what we want, and we chase our dreams. And sometimes, life throws us a curveball, and then we have choices to make, right? We don't get to control what comes in, but we always get to control how we respond, right? We always get to choose how we're going to respond mentally, emotionally, spiritually to the hand we've been dealt, and we always have that choice. And it's not always easy.
No,
it may
it's
not be the choice we want to make.
No, and sometimes, I would even argue to say, sometimes we even make the wrong choice. We let it, I know for me anyways, it's I'm just going to choose to just let myself be devastated by this, for a while. And then, what I'll come out of it, but right now I want to be upset about it. And so whether that's, right or wrong, I don't know, but I know that sometimes that's what I do. So it's not always just pull yourself up by the bootstraps, because it's sometimes it's okay to just sit with your feelings that are bad or negative or whatever connotation you want to work with it. So I think that's part of knowing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a guy who disassociated with most of my feelings, and I grew up in a family where a lot of feelings weren't okay, and so disowning that, suppressing a lot of those, it took me a long time to get to a point where it was okay, I can actually acknowledge that I'm feeling hurt, that I'm feeling angry, that I don't just have to be so stoic, right? And suck it up, right? And because I ended up not dealing with any of those things. But the problem is with emotions, especially when we don't deal with those emotions, they continue to operate beneath the surface, right?
And they come up in a place that wasn't even about the situation.
Yes.
And, and that's, affecting other people and situations and whatever else. And so that I think is where the tide turns. Emotional growth.
We get spillage, we get collateral damage, and
unintended, but it happens anyways.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with, usually where it ends up showing up. A lot of times it doesn't, and that is the importance of emotional intelligence. Something that I didn't have for a long time.
You and me both. And me both.
It's a journey.
It's a journey. A long one.
Yeah, for sure. So, you graduate, All-American in volleyball, you've got your degree.
Got my degree.
And you wanted to continue on and get a master's. When did you decide you wanted to coach and train?
So, I think, when I got injured, I spent a lot of time with my strength and conditioning coach in college. And, because that's the place that they send you when you can't practice, right?
Right.
So, we're going to get back strong. And I enjoyed the inner workings and, kind of the behind-the-scenes stuff that came with strength and conditioning, because there's no starting lineup announced in the weight room, right? There's just work in there. That's all there is. And I would say that I had a big point of growth for me in knowing that I would not have been a good volleyball coach. I could not see past that play. We just talked about that emotional intelligence. I feel that I really lacked that at that age to be able to string the whole match together. But I really knew that I didn't want to be behind a desk all day. And so, like I said, I really gravitated towards my strength coach and got pretty good at the lifts. And I was like, I think that I could do this, and applied for a graduate assistantship at North Dakota State. Didn't get it. Then, about a week later, got another phone call from North Dakota State. The person who accepted that position dropped out, and then they offered it to me. So again, because I handled that initial rejection well, I think, from them, I think that they could circle back around, and then, moved on up to Fargo, which is close to my parents, about an hour away, and went to school and drafted my very first program, which, was not good. But that's part of being a graduate assistant is you get the mentorship from the coaches in front of you. And I worked with the throwers, I worked with women's golf, and I worked with baseball. And I assisted with football because everybody assisted with football at that time, and got different pieces of programming information, learned how to really read strength and conditioning research and understanding different loads and set and rep schemes and so on and so forth, everything that your degree's supposed to teach you. So did that, and then after that, I still didn't feel after 2 years that I was ready to be the best assistant coach that I could be, and so I applied for a postgraduate internship through the National Strength and Conditioning Association, which gives us our licenses, and I was fortunate enough to be recipient of that. Me and one other person, we were the recipients of the nationwide pool, and so then I got a list of, at that time it was 40 places, because you had to study under a coach that had a distinction. So the Air Force Academy was on that list, and the coach that was here at that time, his name was Alan Hedrick. My thesis was based on a lot of his research on load, and I was like, I could go with the person who probably had 15 of my references in my thesis statement. I could go to that guy and pick his brain for as long as for the next year, and which was how long the internship was. And so he said yes, and I packed up, moved to Colorado Springs, and got to really study underneath him. We had a lot of good conversations. I was first assigned water polo and diving. Gosh, that has been so long ago. I'm going to say I started with those two. That has waxed and waned over the years, but started with those two and really got into the research for those sports. And then the following year, there was Fisher DeBerry, the football coach. He had retired, and so there was a bunch of changes in staff, and then there was an assistant strength coach position open. I applied for it, and fortunately I was able to be hired on full time. And so I've really been at the academy since 2006, but in 2006 I was an intern, and getting my feet wet. And then I did really feel right place, right time, I could apply for that position confidently and be good at it. I've been here ever since, haven't left.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. So coming into the Air Force Academy, right, a totally different university culture from either Minnesota or North Dakota State. What was that like for you, that transition into this kind of military? Because we are a military institution, we're a higher education institution, we're also a military base, and that was a lot of different things.
It was definitely a large learning curve for me, M days and T days. What does that mean? And what do you mean we can't have a lift at 10 o'clock in the morning, to be able to get the athletes through all day. And, I really loved and love to this day teaching physical education. I love it, which is part of our job, right? So physical education over here, strength and conditioning over here. And I love this because, again, it challenges me I teach volleyball class, right? I have to teach somebody how to play volleyball who's never played volleyball before. That's a challenge. And you have 10 hours to do it. Can they play recognizable volleyball? And so, like, they challenge me to be better for our athletes over here. Because, you learn different cues, and you're like, okay, well, that works to cue it that way. Or you get some kind of pattern of your teaching down that works. And then you can be a little bit more efficient over here for our athletes. So I feel like, teaching has made me a much better coach. And another difference that I noticed was working at North Dakota State, and this isn't a knock against North Dakota State, but like the expectations are different. And so like here, the reason I feel like I love it so much here, working with our teams, even though they might not have the level of success that the Power 5 conferences have. We don't run into like strange problem sets. We don't have to worry about our athletes going out and making the mistakes that cost them their spot on the team, or perhaps their freedom. We don't have that here. It's like everybody shows up on time, everybody wants to work hard, and then they go up to the hill and study. At least what they tell us, right? So
I don't know how the intercollegiate athletes do it, honestly, with their schedules. I'm constantly impressed at how they juggle the academics and the military training and the competitive side.
And they do pretty okay. They're pretty all right,
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So and all that, keeping a good attitude and staying as injury free as they can, and like they especially they have to get everything right.
Yeah.
They got to sleep right. They have to hydrate right. They have to eat correctly. Like the effort in practice. And I think it's a misnomer to say let's just give 100%. It's like I wish I could have 100% out of anybody on any day. We don't get like I'm hoping we get 70 or 80. Like if we can just get 70 or 80 consistently, I think we'll be. And that's for anybody here in any Power 5. Like what is 100%? Like
it changes, right? Today's 100% may not be tomorrow's.
Exactly,
100%.
And I think that's something also for us to remember, because I think it feeds into what you had said earlier about like, well, I'm seen as a failure if it's not this thing, and it's like, yeah, but like, yes, like you just said, yesterday's 100% is going to be different than today's, and what does that mean?
Right. Yeah. So you're coaching and you're teaching and you're learning, and in the midst of all this, you're also competing.
I am.
So
yes.
What made you want to make that lift, the switch over to competitive weightlifting in the midst of all this?
Well, again, Coach Hedrick, he and his daughter were competitive weightlifters, and I got to be pretty good friends with her, and so I would say that they had a big influence on that. And for me, prior to starting weightlifting, when I moved here, I ran a marathon up in Crested Butte.
Wow.
And back where I'm from, in Minnesota, like on the city signs, that's not elevation, that's population. And so that is the population. So when we're driving, I had no idea, right? And so when we get there, I'm like, what does 10,000 ELE mean? Or whatever the sign said. It was close to that. I was like, what does that mean? And so I found out the next day at 6:30.
Wow.
But for me, what I found was I didn't enjoy working out for the sake of working out. I needed to have purpose behind my training. And so, when I was in college, volleyball was the purpose behind that behind-the-scenes training of weightlifting and conditioning. And then when I, marathon, same thing. Did it once and check, right?
Check the box.
Check, got it done. And then, again, meeting Alan and Lindsay, coming to that weightlifting piece, it's like, okay, well, there's an end state for that. There's this build-up, there's this end state, and then the cycle repeats. And so for me, I found that I worked better under those conditions of having a purpose behind the training. And a lot of people, kudos to everybody who just, works out after work to get it in for their health or whatever reason. Like, I can't. Like, I'm lazy like that. Like, I have to have something that it's for, or I am really unmotivated to do it. So.
Yeah, I tend to be the same way.
I need to have it for something.
Yeah. So you shared a story with me from one of your weightlifting competitions. Mm-hmm. I think you said this was one of your favorite memories about weightlifting, and it didn't start pretty.
No.
You want to share a little bit about that?
Yes. So I can't remember what actual event it was. I do know it was in Colorado Springs, because at that time they had the platform for the Atlanta Games. Like that was our competition platform, which was surreal to step on an actual Olympic platform. And I had my starting weight set. Like the snatch event went fine. I didn't feel like I had cut too much weight. Like I felt like I was right on where I needed to be for my weight class. Your training weight and your competition weight different. And just having problems on the clean and jerk. Like I felt the warm-ups went fine. My first clean, just dropped it in the clean. I don't remember if it was the pull. Like I just remember I got it like halfway out and the bar dumped forward, and it was really surprising. I was like, okay. And for those of you out there, like for a weightlifting event, you have 3 attempts at the snatch, which is the first event, and then there's an intermission, and then you have 3 attempts at the clean and jerk, which is the second event. And so you have to score a total in each one of those things. So you have to make one of the lifts in the snatch, and you have to make one in the clean and jerk. A lot of people go 6 for 6, some people go 2 for 6, but as long as they have a total in each one of those events, they'll have what's called the qualifying total. So, missed the first one. So, no big deal, right? Somebody else goes, and then I go again, and got the cleanup, no problem, missed the jerk. And I'm like, what is happening? And I heard actually some chatter behind, and somebody's like, oh, she started too heavy. And in my mind, I'm like, this is actually my warm-up weight, and like something, I don't know what is happening. Mm-hmm. And so my coach, he goes, KP, he's like, you can do this. He's like, I believe in you. This is a weight you've hit 100 times, And I said, okay. So I go out there and I take a big breath, and I got the cleanup, and I got the jerk up, and everybody's clapping. Not because I didn't win that competition. I think I got 3rd or maybe didn't even place. I don't quite remember. I just remember when I brought the bar down and I saw the 3 white lights, and I turned over and my coach had these tears in my eyes. Like I felt so proud of that effort. Again, even though I didn't make a podium, it was that was super hard. Like there was starting to be a mental component in there. That's the same weight 3 times in a row. Same thing. Like
a weight you've done many times before.
And so you start to, those thoughts start to creep in your head. But, again, I was so proud I was able to overcome that. That I didn't just have this expectation that I was going to overcome it, like that I did. Because, that weight felt like 1,000,000 pounds. And I don't know what happened, but at the end of the day, we got it up, and I didn't scratch the competition. And so I was proud of that.
Yeah. So making the transition from competitive volleyball, a team sport, to competitive weightlifting, now an individual sport, what was hard about that for you, and were there some skills that transferred over for you?
I think the power skills transferred, because volleyball's a powerful movement, weightlifting, powerful movements, so I think that was a good skill transfer. I wouldn't call myself super good at volleyball or weightlifting, or jiu-jitsu.
All-American.
I wouldn't call myself good at any of that. But, again, I go back to my work ethic. I wanted to work really hard to be as good as whatever my physical limitation was. Because everybody's got a ceiling, and so I wanted to work to whatever that was going to be for me. I will say I did miss, the team aspect of it, because if Alan or Lindsay weren't there, well, I was working out by myself, and which doesn't bother me now, but initially it bothered me then. Yeah. To not have that camaraderie or at that particular time. So I would say that that would be what I thought transferred and what I struggled with a little bit there. And just like any, I don't believe that practice makes perfect. I think that practice makes habits.
Yeah. And
so you can continue to practice something, but continually practice it incorrectly, and it's not going to help you.
Right.
And so for me, like, I really wanted to make sure that, even though my weights weren't really heavy, at that time, just starting out, I really wanted to make sure that technically I got it correct, because with incorrect technique, especially, like, your ceiling's going to come a lot faster than if you don't.
Right.
So I probably got to right about there. So.
Okay.
So.
You bring a really good point up, which is, practice doesn't make perfect; it makes permanent in some cases. It creates those habits. And this is something I talked about in a couple of my episodes on the podcast, which is, if something's not working, we need to mix it up.
Yes.
Continuing to do the same thing over and over again, especially if it's not working, is the definition of insanity.
Yes.
Right? And hoping for a different result, like maybe this time, maybe this time, right? And but it's a hard realization to make, right? If things are working, then you're just systematizing success.
Yes. And
yes, absolutely. But when they're not working, that's when we need to mix things up, and then we can get better at technique. Mm-hmm. It's funny because when I was younger, and I played competitive tennis, played volleyball, I played basketball, I didn't have nearly as good a technique in a lot of ways as I do now.
Oh, of course.
And sometimes I think, man, if I could just put this knowledge and this skill set back into that body.
100%.
Yeah, so interesting though. But so many times I get stuck in that. Like, okay, I just need to try harder. I need to get a little stronger, a little faster, without thinking through, okay, how about maybe we work a little bit smarter and not just harder. Because the effort's going to be there, but we just need from the art of war perspective, sometimes we need a tactical advantage. We need a skill, we need a technique, we need something that we can leverage that will be a game changer for us.
And I think to add to that, like, it's not necessarily a skill or technique, but it's understanding why the skill or technique works.
Yes.
Because I think that we could, again, if we're playing golf, we could just continually swing at the ball mindlessly, and we can make contact and whatever else. But I think that actually understanding what happens through the motion of the swing is what's going to then lead to our further success. Like, we have to know the why behind things, instead of this, it's working. It's working, but do you know why it's working?
Why? Yeah.
And, and even for myself too, it's, throughout, as it pertains to jiu-jitsu, like, knowing, like, why it's like, you could sit there and do that technique a lot of times, but, like, if you don't know why it's working, when the time comes, it might not serve you. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's such an important piece of my message in the podcast that I share. One of the 5 essential strategic success factors is you need to understand why. You need to have a why, because it's our why that's our way forward. And thinking about these big grand goals, that kind of makes sense. But even thinking through a specific technique, understanding the why is the way forward to progress. And so, it clicked when you said that. I'd never thought about it in terms that specific, in terms of this technique or this approach, or even something as simple as how you hold, the ball or whatever it is. That understanding the why does open up a whole nother realm of growth, which is really interesting. So you mentioned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
Why and how did you make that shift? Where'd that come from?
As I stated earlier, I'm the course director for Combatives 1 here, and when I first started teaching the Combatives courses, like, again, I could teach them the motions, but I couldn't tell them why. And so I wanted to improve myself in that area so I could improve them, because, being at a military institution, there is a real possibility that this is a technique, or, that course could be something that they really have to do. And so I felt, a little guilty about, like, not being able to provide that to them. And so I started training a little bit more here on the installation, and then I went outside the installation and joined a gym, and really gravitated towards that. And it brought even though it's an individual sport, it brought the team aspect back in. and I found out that, you know, how weightlifting, you know, could support this. And so, you know, still do the weightlifting, still do all of that. But again, you have your power over here, right? And any type of grappling is very much endurance based. So they were going to be competing priorities, and had to pick one. And, you know, like, gosh, your knees are banged up all the time in weightlifting. And for me, my shoulders, because also, like, I'm a little bit, you know, to your point earlier, I'm a little bit tall for a weightlifter.
Yeah.
You know, at my weight class, like a little bit tall. It's so funny. I have this picture, and I'll show you after this. It was our lineup at the American Open, and it was me and then everybody else in my weight class.
Oh, goodness.
And it was just so funny, and I'll have to find it.
You have to send it. I'll post it in the blog version for everybody to see.
And it was super funny, and so I was like, well, you know, I still enjoyed competing. You know, I think I started jiu-jitsu when I was 30 or 31. You know, late bloomer. You know, a lot of young people are already, you know, have their black belt by that time, and but that was fine to me. I didn't know or care enough about that at that time, but you know, so it's like this. I found it to be easier on my body. I could still compete. I could be successful in competing because, you know, there was age groups. It's still weight classes, but I'd already done a weight class sport, no problem, right? So, you know, these age categories and same skill level, and so I felt really comfortable in doing it. And again, it was just another challenge, and I really liked that. So that's how that transition came to be.
And you were really good. There was a time where you were competing a lot, and I mean, you were just kicking butt and taking names.
You know, I did, like, it, but you know, the sacrifice to that is, you know, you train 3 times a day, and when you work full time, you train before work at 5 or 6 in the morning. You train at lunch with some people who are nice enough to train with you, and then you train at night, and then you got to get a weightlifting session in. And for me, I was like, well, you know, when I started to get, you know, really competitive and through that phase, you know, probably then I was, I don't know, mid to late 30s at that point. And I was like, okay, like, is this something that we're going to make a lot of money on? Like, you know, again, it's like, at what point is your priority, like, you know, you're 35, 36, 37, like, banging up your body like this, which is fine. But, like, at the end of the day, like, you got to work over here, you know? Yeah. And, you know, so it is something that was awesome. Won a lot. Happy for all those experiences. But again, we'll talk about some other competing priorities in life, right? But that has started to come more to a realistic perspective for me of somebody who's now over 40, you know, being like, okay, well, what can we do with this skill set that we have? Still compete and have fun, but also make room for other priorities in life. Because I think at that point I was a little unbalanced in life.
Yeah. So you shared a funny story with me once about a competition, jiu-jitsu competition, but it ended up really well. You and your opponent both had the same equipment failure.
Yes.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. What is that? A wardrobe malfunction?
Yes.
So yeah, we were in the finals of the Atlanta Open, and you know, you're not supposed to do this, but I went and YouTubed some of her videos. You know, they tell you not to do that so you don't get this false impression or whatever. So, but I did it anyways, and it was super tough, right? Competing at the Atlanta Open, so of course she's super tough. And like, you know, we had our grips. We were in the gi, and you know, we're starting to feel each other out in the beginning of the match. And I always double tie my pants, always. And I could feel my pants starting to wiggle down. And, you know, of course she had, like, spandex on underneath, but, like, I could still, and I start giggling a little bit, and then I see the same thing happening to her. And she's giggling a little bit. And so, like, we're sitting there at these grips, and, like, we just disengage mutually at the same time and fix our pants, and we're just kind of like, Dave and I right here just laughing. And we both took a penalty from the referee. We took a penalty for it because it's, you know, delay, but it was just super funny, and it just brought this human moment to it, that it's like, it's not all about, you know, the competition at the end of the day. It's like, you know, we're two, you know, middle-aged, if that's what you want to call it, mid-30s ladies, like having this thing happen. It just was a funny moment, and and then we just got back to it. So.
But I mean, this is championship match.
It's a championship
right?
match.
And the premier competition. And you know, I love how you both handled it.
Yes.
Right? Because I think sometimes things can get so intense. And you know, one of Swenza's 5 essential characteristics of good leaders is empathy, or the ability to relate to somebody through our shared humanity. That story just, it doesn't get more shared humanity than that. Both of our pants were falling off.
And we did laugh, and then we slapped hands again, and then we just restarted.
And it was back on.
It was back on, yeah.
So you went to the finals of the Pan Am Games.
I did.
And you got defeated.
Lost.
You lost.
I lost.
What was that like?
I think that disappointment happens when you have mismanaged expectations. I really do. And I felt good going in, like was on weight. My other matches were on point, like, execute the game plan. And then she had executed a move that I had not seen in a competition yet. Because I like to fight from my feet. I like to take down. My husband wrestles, not a shabby wrestler. So I prefer to start like that. And, in women's jiu-jitsu, a lot of people will try to do what's called a jumping guard. And so they'll instantly try to initiate their guard from their feet. They'll jump on your waist and take you to the ground that way. So now you have to work out of their guard and pass. And so I had her up in a single, and she just went straight to her back, and I didn't control her opposite leg because I had both of my hands on for the single, and she flying triangled me, and she put me in a triangle choke from the air and put me to the ground, and it was over. So I had not prepared for that. You should be prepared for everything, right? But I had not seen that I hadn't seen it, and I was just tip of the cap, you got me. And happy for her to have that success. But for me, it was okay, we need to maybe do a little bit more video study. We need to maybe feel when different things are going to happen. Because even though I had her leg, I just was solely focused on takedown instead of, well, what's she going to do? And so I didn't kind of bring it back to, again, that I was on this versus that. And so that was, wish it wouldn't have been the finals where I learned that lesson, but I learned it nonetheless. And so now it goes back to the why. And so I think that has improved my training in a way to kind of search for these little nooks and crannies of possibility.
Yeah. And again, that defeat didn't break you.
No, it didn't. It did for that hour.
Sure. Which is expected, right? Disappointed.
Yeah, disappointed because again, my professor at my gym, he'll, I'll preface it with these weren't his exact words, but his message was, hard work doesn't equate to success because everybody's working hard. Yeah. You assume, in MMA and jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, everyone's working hard. And like I told you before, there's 2 teams in the national championship and somebody's not winning. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It doesn't. It just means they've both worked hard, but only one can walk out of here with the biggest trophy.
Right.
And so it'd be nice to see the flip side of that. Whereas, all the interviews are over here, but what's those people's reactions? And
right.
And how can we understand their vantage point a little bit more?
Yeah. So we've talked about volleyball, we've talked about weightlifting, we've talked about coming to the academy as the first female strength and conditioning coach, really opening avenues there. We talked about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In the midst of all of this, a successful career, you decide you want to join the Army.
I did.
And be a military police officer.
Yes.
Where did that come from? I remember you telling me that when you were going to do this one day at
Yes.
volleyball, and you did it. You went off to basic training. And you weren't looking for the cushy, quick commission here to some cushy desk job, or I want to be in charge of this and that. But you really wanted to go through everything.
I did.
Tell me about that.
Well, I do distinctly remember when I was 18, having the recruiter, we were in like the guidance counselor's office, right? We brought our lunch in there. I remember listening to this person, and I feel like I've had it on my heart to serve like my whole life, like starting back then. I did not make that decision back then because being 18-year-old me, I was like, well, I want to play volleyball and party and do what college kids do, and so I did that, and but that feeling like never went away. And the more that I became immersed in the academy and seeing what the cadets go through, and the permanent party here, and like from the officer side of the house, I was like, I want to do this. And like it just it started as a little tap at the door, and pretty soon it was just like banging over the course of the years I had been here, because I think I'd worked at the academy 7 or 8 years before I joined the Army. So I'm already in this, like you said, like this career, like in my groove professionally. And the day that I decided I was going to do it, I called every branch of the military. It was kind of around Christmas, I remember that. And the only people that answered the phone was the Army. I do remember that, because it was like during probably block leave for holidays or whatever. They were the only ones that answered the phone. And so like I was like, all right, I'll come down, and did like sign up all the paperwork and my choices, because they have so many jobs they need to fill per branch. I could have been an engineer, and I am not good at math. I can add by 45s, the weight plates, right? But I can't. I don't like. I did not feel I was going to be successful at the other aspects of that was required, or military police, and starting to have that combatives background. Not that that's solely military police, but I feel like I could relate to that particular career field more. So I did. I took a sabbatical, and that summer I went to basic training, and then I went to at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for the officer candidate school. And so I was gone for probably about 6 months, and then I came back to the academy. The following summer I went to the military police basic course, which was just during the summer, which is a good time for us. Yeah. And then in October when I got back, it was my first battle assembly backs in the reserves. We're not full-time. We do our 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, or so they say. It's more than that, but so they say. We'll start that baseline. And, went to battle assembly in October, first one back, and my commander says, we're going to deploy to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba in December, and I want you're going. So, okay. So came back to work, told them, hey, I'm going to be on this tour for 365, and we went to Guantanamo Bay, and that was hard being a female down there as well. But we got through it, and we made it through a hurricane, and it's just overall that was a good experience as well. So I learned so much about the Army, about being an officer, being a military police officer. There really is no family like your Army family. I still talk to a lot of my old soldiers to this day, and worked with a few, like cross paths and other assignments, and it's been, it's been good. I just knew I had it on my heart to serve. I knew I had more that I could give. I knew I had this purpose of service, and we do that here as civilians, but like I felt I could give more in that particular area, and so I did, and I don't regret it. Still doing it, so.
Decorated officer. I know you don't to your own horn, but decorated officer. And what was it like, not only being a female in the Army, but older than a lot of the people you went through basic training with, and and then also as an officer and as a military police officer, you've got you're in the minority.
I am.
What was that like?
Even in strength and conditioning, like, I don't know if I've just always chosen career paths where there's just not a lot of women, but at the same time, I can appreciate somebody, like the females before me, whether it's been, reading their past works in strength and conditioning from 20 years ago when it was just, one or two females. When I became a coach, only 5% of the strength coaches were females. 3 to 5, I think it was. But, and that was, over 20 years ago at this point. But I think that we have such an opportunity to show, number one, other females, what the way is, and, males. Like, this is perhaps how you can integrate with females. You're a lower female density population in this particular career field. This is how we integrate, or this is what they can bring to the table, or this is how we can all work together.
Right.
And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to be able to facilitate in conversation, professional conversation, help out personally, like really get to know people on a personal level, as well as, maybe debunk some stereotypes on some things. And I'll share this story. It's kind of funny. I was at OCS and I had a male counterpart. I had maxed the PT test. I'll just leave it at that. I maxed the PT test. And we were back at the barracks getting ready, and he walked by and he made some comment about, well, if I had your standards, I would have maxed it too. And I turned to him and I said, that's why I maxed the men's test. And his jaw dropped and he walked away. And so it's like, but as a female, did I need to do that? Did I need to max the men's test to prove my worth to the Army?
Yeah.
And so, that was over 10 years ago, and I remember that still.
Oh,
so that's why I maxed the men's test. So.
Well, I'm sure that on the one hand, you're this standard of excellence, but I can see probably some guys being intimidated by being just outperformed, at anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
By a woman, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not right. It still
Mm-hmm.
happens,
Sure.
right? But that must have been. I love your approach to it.
Mm-hmm. And it was so funny because you're right. Like I was, in my early 30s when I joined the Army, and to have the 22-year-olds, behind me, and kind of like, wow, like it's like, feel empowered as a woman,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying they didn't, but it was like, I could set an example for them. Again, not saying that you have to go over the standard to prove yourself, but sometimes you got to take some lumps and do stuff like that, whether you're male or female, to really show that you're serious about something. And I feel like that I can tell you he didn't say anything again. and I became more of a mentor to those two girls after that. So it was, even though I probably didn't need to say that, so at the end it worked out because I was able to help them in some kind of way.
Right, you empowered them. You set an
Mm-hmm.
example of what's acceptable, what's not,
Mm-hmm.
and also what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, what's possible. That's a good way to put it. Yes.
Yeah, and probably for some guys too,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah, maybe. We'll never know. I guess
Yeah.
you never know how far your knife hand reaches. So.
Right. So along the way,
Mhm.
you meet Marco,
Yes.
your husband,
Yes.
and who I've still never met in person. And
He exists.
He does. He's currently deployed. And Marco,
Yes.
wherever you are, thank you for sharing her. I hope you're safe. You did well. And so you get married and
Yes.
you want to start a family.
Yes.
And that really brings us to kind of a core message that you want to share with everybody.
Yes.
And it hasn't really worked out the way you wanted to.
No.
Right? And so,
No. Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet.
So, yes. So, again, I'm over 40. Marco and I met when we were in our late 30s. He was actually in the same unit as me. When I was a second lieutenant, he was a cadet. And so we knew each other there. We were dating other people at the time. And then I might have mentioned he's not a shabby wrestler, so he was getting ready for the Rio Olympics in Greco-Roman wrestling. the Olympic trials, and then I deployed. And so when I came back, I actually saw him at my jiu-jitsu gym, and we did one of those, hey, I recognize you, and kind of caught up there, and then peas and carrots, started dating, and here we are. And we got married in our late 30s. I think I was 38 when we got married, and we knew we wanted children out of the gate, and we haven't had a lot of success at that. We've had 2 miscarriages. We've had 3 failed intrauterine inseminations. We've had 4 egg retrievals, so we move on to IVF, you move on to the big guns. And we did our egg retrievals because I was near, at, or over 40 when all this was going on. So we did all of our egg retrievals first, and we're going to do the transfer process after that. And so 4 rounds of that gave us 8 embryos. And in November of this past year, we attempted to do our first transfer, and I wasn't given enough medication, and so it kind of ruined that cycle. So all that anticipation, it's like, bah. So then we wait till January of 23, and then we do our embryo transfer, and it failed as well. And so that has been very hard because, I feel like I've done the best for my body, right? Like, gave it good food, didn't abuse it through drugs and alcohol, like sleep, hydrate, keep it in shape through exercise. And this one thing I would like it to do, it is not doing what I want it to do right now.
Yeah.
And so that has been, from where we started in the process to now, it's hard to believe it's been 5 years or more. So the emotional and physical toll it takes on you, the sacrifices and challenges, like one thing after the other, like the expense. I mean, it all kind of comes into play. But we have 7 embryos left, and I'm really optimistic that we'll have the family that we want. However, there's certain check marks that we're gonna have, and certain decision points, and and then we'll either course correct or we'll move on to the next kind of plan. And and I feel like, and I told you this before, but I think that when it comes to IVF, like, we hear about the successes, right? Like, oh, my case was 5 years, but in a different context, oh, it's 5 years, and now we have this baby at home, and so we did all of these things, and that's what worked for us. And we don't hear enough about the situations like mine, where it's like 5 years and let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 failed fertility treatments, that 2 miscarriages. There's not enough of that. And you're not alone if you're listening to this and you're out there. Like, I haven't had success, and I'm talking about how I haven't had success. And so, that has been difficult. It's been very difficult,
to say the least, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So and I hear a little bit every once in a while. You share, and I was there, happened to be there during volleyball, and the doctor called the last time, and just heartbreaking.
It was.
How have you maintained your mindset through this? What's the process? 5 years of just wanting a baby and wanting this family. How have you got through that? What's that been like for you?
I can't say that it's been easy. It has not. I would say that, I go through bouts of depression. I would say that, even now, I would say that I have, it's difficult when your husband's deployed and you get the phone call that your embryo transfer has failed. But I just took a few plays off, and then it was right back at it, right? So we had volleyball to play.
Therapeutic at that point.
Yes, and it's not to minimize anybody's situation, but we all have to deal with things in our own way. And I think looking back from the beginning when it was like, oh, you have a blocked fallopian tube. That put me out for 3 days. Like, I was inconsolable for 3 days. And looking back on that, it's like, well, that's, nothing compared to, like, what we're dealing with now. And it's like, you're so close. Like, you have, and we're so lucky that we have 7 embryos. Like, people don't even get there. So we are incredibly lucky to have that many chances. And so I'm grateful for that doesn't ever leave me. I will say that, though, like, going through this process, like, for me anyways, it's like you become, I don't know if hard is the right word, like hardened a little bit. And it really is well, you know what, we're going to hope for the best, but we're going to stay optimistic, but we also know, again, 'cause, disappointment, mismatched expectations, right? However, we also know, based on what we've done in our own research, because I would say we didn't do that until we started, because why would you, right?
Right.
Like, until we started running into problems and becoming your own advocate, which is what I would say to you all, is become your own advocate, to then be like, okay, well, there's this probability as well, like, and we're, prepared for both of them. And I would say that, as simple as that sounds, I didn't do that in the beginning, and, I do it now. And, always just never losing sight of, like, I just believe that we are going to have the family that we would like. I believe it, like, to my bones, I believe it. And so, like, that's what keeps you going. And, that doesn't mean that every time we get a piece of bad news, it isn't devastating for an hour or a day, because it is.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, well, we tried this treatment. We know that this medication or this treatment didn't work. So now, we're on to this treatment. And, our doctor, we have, switched clinics to a doctor in California who is, has all my old treatment records, is like, okay, well, we're going to try this treatment. And so it's like, I think also knowing that there's people out there that can help you in ways that you wouldn't know unless you sought that out. Or there's, again, your definition of insanity. So I think being able to have that is good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I was like, I have to get a cutoff point before I can cough again. Okay.
Okay. So you brought up the importance of belief.
Yes.
And belief is a choice. It is, and you choose to believe that every day.
I do.
When it's hard, when you're optimistic, when you've got a new direction, and that's something I've talked about. That we sometimes we need to raise the bar on our beliefs, because we can't achieve something we don't believe that we can achieve,
Yes.
and therefore we can never receive that outcome. So we have to believe first, and then we'll be able to find the resources, put in the work to achieve, and then at a certain point we receive in one form or another, maybe not the way we initially thought or envisioned, but it's so important. So if you had 2 minutes to tell the world something that could help change their lives, what would your message be?
Thing is, I knew you were going to ask this question too, and and there was just so much. I would say that you're going to have to edit this, because I got to think about it real quick again.
I'll give you 2.5.
I would say that we have to be. I think that we all say that we're willing and prepared to do, what's necessary, until that thing comes, and then we ask ourselves, well, what is willing and prepared? And from my standpoint, it was taking a break from competition, letting myself gain a little bit of weight. Our marriage, and having the support system that we have, like, through these tough times, right? And so it's like, well, what is everything that we actually need to be able to deal with a hard time? And I'm not sure that I'll change the world with this statement, but I would say, like, you know, we all know that we're going to go through hard times. So I would just implore everybody out there to find out what it is for you that you do need to prepare yourself for what that thing is. Because I think that we all think that we know. But until I was in this experience, and even in the beginning of that experience, I thought I knew, but I didn't know. And so, like, I think that having, you know, a hope, and that hope might change every day. The hope for, you know, Marco and I is that the treatment works even before the transfer. Like, we hope that the treatment works. So with the ultimate goal of, well, our hope is to have that baby, but our first hope in measurable bites is step one, like, we hope that treatment works. And then we hope the embryo implants, and then we hope it's a healthy pregnancy, and so on and so forth. So we had a very deliberate process instead of this arbitrary end goal. We had these very small bites along the way of hopes. And that way, if the plan didn't work, well, it doesn't mean that this won't work. It just means that this thing right now, we need to find something different to replace that other plan that didn't work. And then we can continue to make our move forward. So, you know, not losing the forest for the trees, so to speak. Yeah. And so, like, that's what keeps us going, is that there's other treatments out there for us. And you know what, I'm really optimistic we're going to find one that works for us. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And
appreciate you.
I mean, man, so much. I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. So many amazing things to think about, great stories, but a lot of truths and a lot of really empowering principles. Mm-hmm. You know, it is easy to get lost in the trees, mm-hmm. right? And sometimes we feel like the distance between where we are to where we want to be is so vast, mm-hmm. and the obstacles so insurmountable that, you know, it just feels overwhelming, and then we give up. Mm-hmm. We give in, we settle. But to actually say, okay, I know what I want, let's work backwards, and mm-hmm. I don't need to get there today, I need to get here today.
Exactly.
Is really empowering. It makes it manageable, right?
Yes.
This is how to eat an elephant
one bite at a time.
Yeah. So, yes. And so if people are struggling with in vitro or just mm-hmm. any fertility issues, I know that you've said that you'd be more than happy to be, you know, part of a support.
Yes. Can I share one other story?
Absolutely, please.
So I, in my research and my treatments, I had found a particular treatment that I wanted to try, and I found a particular business in town that was able to accommodate that treatment. And so when I called, you know, a nice woman answered the phone, and I was talking about what I was hoping to have happen, and it was oddly specific. And so she had asked me why I made that request, and I told her, well, according to what I've been reading, you know, XYZ things will help with fertility treatment. And there was this long pause, and she said, well, my husband and I are going through IVF. Like, I don't want to sound unprofessional, but can I ask you a few questions? And I said, absolutely. And so we did. We had a talk, and then I told her that she could use my number anytime, because you really do feel isolated. You do feel, I mean, this roller coaster. And so again, I'm empathizing with all of you out there. And again, I haven't had success yet, so I'm in that boat with you. And so I believe that you have a link through your the podcast. Okay, so if there's anybody that wants to get a hold of me, I mean, about anything, like I'm happy to respond to you. I want to help you in any way that I can, because I can tell you that I didn't have that for myself in the beginning. And so if I can be that person for you to help answer some questions. Again, I have no medical degree, no medical knowledge. I just know my own experience in this particular area, and I'm happy to talk with anybody about that. So.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, a lot of times when you're going through hard things, we don't need someone to fix the problem mm-hmm. for us. We just need someone who will go through the trenches with us.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Like you are with me.
It's been fun. It's been a privilege. Yes. You know, and I mean, that's what it's all about. Is we all have our struggles. My struggle is not fertility. I don't have, I'm a guy, and I've got 9 kids, right? So it's like, you don't relate at all, Dave. Come on, right? It's like, but I know what it's like in the heat of my own battles. I know how hard that struggle is to believe that you can achieve some outcome that seems so impossible, and to overcome those obstacles that seem really insurmountable. And I know what it feels like to feel that despair, to feel that hopelessness, and I never want that for anybody.
Exactly.
And so, empathy allows us to recognize you feel the same way about your struggles with fertility that I feel about my own struggles, and knowing how I feel, knowing what would have helped me have that support, somebody that you can, the blood, sweat, and tears, right? That when those bombs go off in life, whether they're real or metaphorical, that you have somebody that you can cry with, you have somebody you can laugh with, you have somebody who would be like, I don't understand what's going on in your life right now, I can't even imagine, but I know how it's making you feel, and I've felt this way about similar things, and I care enough about you to say, hey, let's figure out a way to get through it together, and we can't fix it, but we can all be there together and be like, it's a shoulder to cry on. And sometimes I need that shoulder, and sometimes you need that shoulder, and sometimes we just need to get out and play volleyball.
Exactly.
Whatever it is, right? That recreation that can recreate. I talked about this in an earlier episode of my podcast, that having meaningful recreation is so important, because meaningful recreation is not that diversion. It's not just the diversion or the escape away from our problems. It actually, from the Chinese perspective, it restores what we've lost on our journey. That's the root meaning. And that's so important, right? It's an investment in ourselves that restores what we've lost along the way, and then empowers us to keep moving forward. And we all need that.
We do.
So,
it's hard.
Yes.
We need it.
So thank you so much.
You're
This
welcome.
has been so much fun.
It has been.
And thank you everybody
Yes,
so
thank
much
you.
for listening. You guys are all amazing. I hope that you find something in here. I'm sure that if you listen to this, something's going to be helpful, it'll be impactful for you. And I always end the episodes with the thing that I want you guys to remember the most is that the power to win resides within. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.